Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian and you probably already know I'm co-founder at Ruby Reese and at dognutrition.ie, and I will be your podcast host as well today. This week we're talking about a really cool topic, one that's hot on everybody's minds. We're going to be talking all about enrichment, and the company we're going to be speaking with is headed up by Rosie, and it's called just that, All About Enrichment. Why is this topic so important? Well, I suppose we invite dogs into our lives. They don't always get much choice in the situation, and it's up to us to make sure that they're happy, they're healthy, they're stimulated, they're having a really enjoyable time, and at least for a couple of moments out of the day or a couple of hours out of the week, that they're doing things that they innately really love to do. So really excited to let you listen into the chat that I had with Rosie all about that. Before we get into that, I've got a huge ask, and I've asked it loads of times on the podcast before, but this time I think you're going to listen to me. This podcast is going to be enriched by you sharing it out to your following, to your friends, to your family. Pick an episode and send it out there. On our Instagram, we've got loads of different reels, clips of amazing speakers that have come on and donated their time, and they're giving away amazing nuggets of information for absolutely free. Yes, for free. So I think there's hundreds of thousands of people living in Ireland. And of course, hello to our international listeners as well. We do see you. There's millions of dog owners, dog guardians around the world that could benefit from listening in to the information that our guests share. So please consider sharing this with your following, your clients, your friends, your family. It would be so appreciated, and it would really enrich this podcast. Now to get into dog enrichment while you're posting, we're going to now jump straight into the conversation that I had with Rosie. Rosie, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me today, Killian.
Thank you for coming on and chatting with me. Would you do us the pleasure of introducing yourself for anyone that might know you yet?
Absolutely. So my name is Rosie. I run a business called All About Enrichment. I am a canine enrichment specialist. I do also have a special interest in other animals as well. So cats, ferrets, guinea pigs, hamsters, basically any captive animal can have enrichment. So it's a specialist area of interest of mine. I've been running the business for the last 18 months. The business started out with making and selling some enrichment toys, and then evolved over time into a bigger business in terms of the product and service offering. So in addition to the enrichment toys, I do workshops with customers and with the rescue sector on enrichment. And I also do one-to-ones. Those are home-based support sessions, and also public sessions where you can bring your dog for a 45-minute enrichment session.
Amazing. And we've mentioned one word here a couple of times, and we know we hear it in the community an awful lot. So maybe we could start off and just try and pull apart what even is canine enrichment.
Absolutely. I think it's become a hugely topical buzzword, if you like, especially on social media. I think it's very commonly used hashtag, and we see lots of very nice posts on places like Instagram showing some really nice food toys and things. Enrichment is all about meeting the needs of an animal by providing outlets for natural behaviours that will look different, not just by species, but also by, in some cases, breed, for example, within dogs. But actually, really, it goes down as far as the individual level. So we're really looking at the overall needs of a particular animal. And it also applies to us humans as well. Although we are independent and can meet our own needs, our companion animals are captive, and we need to be able to support their natural behaviours and provide outlets for those.
Yeah, it's absolutely interesting actually to move it to the human side for a second, what's enriching, what makes life really worth living, for me it's travel, cheese, coffee. So I suppose to demystify it totally, it's just stuff that make your life really cool, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's all about adding something to our animals' lives that is going to have a positive effect on them. And probably one of the most important underpinning principles around enrichment is agency. And you mentioned there, Killian, some things that you like. So you like being able to travel, you like eating cheese, you like doing different things. And when we're talking about our companion animals, they do not have agency, so they can't just go. I'm going to go on a cruise this week to the
Hmm.
Caribbean,
Yeah.
or they can't go. I fancy this particular treat today, which is why it's so important that we are giving our dogs choice as part of any enrichment activities. That can be as simple as maybe you've got two chews to offer them, and you're offering them both, and you're letting them choose. It might be something simple like letting them choose the walking route today. So instead of doing your usual lap around the block, letting them decide which way they turn coming out of the house, for example, or letting them loop or zigzag or however they want to follow a scent on their walk as well. It can be as simple as providing multiple spaces for your dog to choose to sleep. Maybe you've got 2 or 3 beds in the same room. One's raised, one's at floor level, one's near a radiator. They can then choose which one they want to go and lie in, for example. So it's all about giving them choice and letting them determine what they engage with.
Yeah, I remember actually a drizzly day in the park. I was passing a couple, and they were watching Ruby and I walking, and I was leaving her determine the route, even though I clearly didn't want to be out in the drizzle. She was actually enjoying having a sniff and getting out of the house. And I remember a couple, I was kind of maybe encouraging her to go the shorter route and saying, Ruby, do you want to go this way? And then she kept going on her loose leash, further along the trail. And I remember this couple laughing at me, and I just laughed back, and I said, look, it's her walk, not mine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is one of my pet peeves is seeing dogs on a short lead being dragged along from sniffing on walks. It's one of the best things we can do for our dogs is letting them sniff on a walk.
Mhm.
It provides so much enrichment because not only are they getting to use their superpower, which is their incredible sense of smell, they are also getting social information from the walk as well. So who else has been there? Maybe there's been some wildlife through. Maybe somebody has walked through with something interesting on their shoes, other dogs. They can gather incredible information about other animals from a sniffy walk, including the health status of other animals that have been through, stress levels, etc., that
Mhm.
come through from marking. So it's a little bit like scrolling doggy social media, and it's a really, really important part of their day. So it's really, really important we do give them that ability to chase and smell scent. And to your point about the drizzly rain and wanting to go home, rain has a really interesting effect on the dispersal of scent. So
Mhm.
you can even do the same walk at different times of the same day, and the scent pool and the smells will be totally different, and your dog will be attracted to different parts of the walk. So it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm sure, coming into kind of like autumn time of year, where you've got loads of crunchy leaves around, and probably, mushrooms and all sorts of things going on, that are new and different and interesting as well. That must be like really exciting for animals that,
Exactly.
like, the way they experience the world through their nose, right?
Absolutely. We have a really interesting tall hedge in our garden. It's the height of the house, and it runs along one end of the garden. And my both two dogs have worn a track in the grass because they're tracking up and down the hedge every day, smelling the ground because it must be a little bit of a haven for wildlife. So they're picking up the scent of various different animals. We know there's definitely hedgehogs because we've seen them, and we've seen a badger as well. So they're getting the benefit of sniffing that trail every day, multiple times throughout the day when they go outside, and it's smelling different to them every time, and they're picking up loads of information, and they're coming in feeling really fulfilled as well because they've used their noses and tracked the scent. So it's just really, really interesting to watch as well.
Absolutely. So we've mentioned a little bit about sniffing. So we've already even hinted at the fact that enrichment doesn't just mean giving toys, or doesn't
Hmm.
just mean a snuffle mat. Um, do we want to maybe briefly touch on the predatory motor pattern and what that even means for our dogs and how they experience the world?
Yep, I'll just get it up on my phone here while it's got like 8 steps, and I always get them out of order. So let me just bring it up.
people that are interested in learning more about this, we did a whole 2 episodes with Darina from Polaris on this, well over a year ago. And then we also had, we touched on this pattern quite a lot as well with Simone Muller last year when we were talking about hunting behaviors in dogs. So if people are interested in this stuff, there's loads to be learned about there, and it's an area of special interest for me.
It's really, really interesting. And I think it is a really important part of enrichment, because providing outlets for that predatory motor pattern that your dog has a propensity towards will be really, really fulfilling for the individual dog, and will also lead to a reduction in some of the behaviours we find potentially quite challenging in a home environment.
Mhm.
So it's just important to note that the predatory motor pattern, it's evolved from wolves.
Mhm.
The modern dog obviously lives a very different life. Lives have changed very, very rapidly for them. However, some elements of that predatory motor pattern remain, and that can be more or less common in certain breeds of dog, which is why we should always be thinking about breed typical enrichment opportunities, because there'll be certain breeds of dogs that have certain elements of certain parts of the pattern and not others, but all dogs will have some element of this sequence. So the first one is orient, which is about finding, and you think about the likes of collies and those types of dogs who are trained on movement. Those would be the types of dogs you think of there, but also your hunting dogs as well, who would be finding and looking for prey in the long grass or the hedgerows. You've then got eye, which is the staring, and for the element, and that's going to be your sheepdogs, your collies, your bird dogs as well. You've also then next got the stalk stage. This is your bird dogs as well, your pointers, your cattle dogs. You've then got the chase stage, which is the pursuit, and that's going to be your shepherds, your sighthounds, your retrievers and spaniels and things as well. Then it's grab bite. And that's going to be dogs like your bull breeds. I know that you have a Frenchie who shows many of these these
this
steps
step
as well.
and the next one that she knows. Yeah.
You've got your kill bite, which is your next one, and we see that a lot with toys at home. You've then got your dissection stage, which I think we'll take maybe a little bit more of a dive into a little bit later on, and then you've got your consume stage. So those are your steps, and as I mentioned, a couple of different breeds there with certain elements. It's just important to note that dogs are obviously individuals as well. So just because you have a certain breed doesn't necessarily mean that the breed typical behaviours you'd expect are going to be there for that dog. So it's always important to think about the dog in front of you when looking at the predatory motor pattern.
Absolutely. And I love that as well, that you have like the individual side, which we all have, and we all have our own preferences. And then obviously like the different breeds, we all, humans chose every single breed for a specific purpose in the past. So it's fascinating to think about, what might my dog have done a couple of 100 years ago as a job, because those type of activities might potentially be really interesting to them. At least that's why their breed kind of existed, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's really important that we remember that how dogs live with us now is a really, really recent phenomenon. Probably only sort of 6, 8, 10 generations of breeding where dogs are companions. So they do have this hardwired into them genetically. And when we bring them into a home now and we ask them to be companions, we're kind of asking them to forget about all of this selective breeding that we've done and all of these behaviours that we specifically selected for a particular type of dog, and not meeting the behaviour needs and not letting them perform elements of this predatory motor pattern can lead to significant issues in a home environment. We see things like a lot of people having issues with resource guardings with dogs like Cocker Spaniels, because they've been taught to, they're in a home where they're not getting to retrieve, they're not getting to hunt with you side by side. So they're going to pick up socks and they're going to run away with them if you're going to try and take them off them. And things like, car chasing and collies, for example, is another significant problem where, again, these dogs have been bred to work all day, with a very significant focus on movement. And then if they can't get that, they're going to, they're going to go self-employed and put that energy somewhere else, and that might not be where we want them to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I think it's amazing when people kind of don't think about the history of their breed. They might have a breed that humanity selected and selectively bred for working in lakes and rivers and things like that, retrieving from the water. And then they're like, I don't know, every time we pass a puddle, my dog has to get involved in it. Yes, your dog was bred. The whole breed was formed in and around that kind of behavior. So it shouldn't be much surprise. So
Exactly.
it's always fascinating to kind of look back in history and see if it could answer some questions for you. So do you maybe want to talk about different behaviors that might suit different parts of the sequence, maybe even like earlier, middle stage, and
Yep.
towards the end?
So if we maybe look at the sort of the earlier stages, where you're looking at kind of the first elements, where there's the sort of the orienting, there's the stalking, etc. Things that are going to be good here are things like flirt poles. They're really, really good, very robust, most of them now, and really, really good fun for you and your dog to play with. You can do things like dog sports. I know, Killian, that you're doing scent work with Ruby, for example. I also do scent work and man trailing and tracking with my two. It's great fun, great social activity, and a great way to use your dog's sense of smell as well. Things like, I haven't mentioned the flirt pole there, but things like fetch. Fetch is one of those difficult ones because it can be extremely repetitive. What I would suggest instead is retrieving. So, if your dog's very fixated on a ball, for example, going and hiding that ball somewhere they can't see where you've hidden it and sending them to search for it and find it can be really, really fulfilling instead. And it's simulating kind of that catching and retrieving prey that would be part of the predatory motor pattern as well. The grab, bite, things like tug are fantastic. A little bit similar to the flirt pole, but the flirt pole is more like simulating prey, whereas tugs, the actual physical wrestling, which is really good fun. The kill bite, again, your tug, your fetch, your flirt pole is going to be really good there. The dissection is the stage that I have two border terrier pug crosses, and the dissection is everything for them. They'll have a little bit of a wrestle with a toy for maybe a couple of minutes with me, but they're actually really more interested in the dissection. So there's lots of things you can do there. And there's lots of things you can DIY. The first thing I would say is just let them shred. Give them an outlet for it rather than preventing it. A lot of people, it's a behavior we often ask our dogs to suppress. We say, don't want you to rip that toy, don't want you to rip that cushion, and that's normal. We've got to have some level of boundary setting in a home, but instead of asking them not to do something, what do you want them to do instead? And really the answer there should be give them something that they can shred. Dogs are incredible at picking up context. They will soon learn what is appropriate and permitted to shred and what is not. So things you can give them to shred instead. DIY options include things like Amazon boxes. Scatter some treats in, close the box over, let them rip through it to get to the food. Toilet roll tubes, scatter some treats in, push some scrunched up paper through, and then close off each end. They have to rip through the toilet roll tube to get to the food. Obviously, supervise. I would say supervise any enrichment activity anyway, but particularly one that involves shredding. Really important to make sure that your dog doesn't swallow anything that might cause them harm. And then you can also do things like going to charity shops and just ask them to let you buy a bag of their ugliest teddies that they can't resell, because either they're the wrong size, or maybe they just aren't suitable for whatever reason. Take any sort of plastic or chewable parts off. So if they've got plastic noses and plastic eyes or whatever, cut those out and just let them shred the toy. I would also say make sure they have the polyester filling and not the little polystyrene beads, because, well, it's a choking hazard, but also it's a nightmare to clean. So the polyester is much better. You can just restuff it. Toys you can restuff and stitch them up, at home to enjoy again and again. I also have a couple of things that I make specifically for shredding. One is a fleece shredding ball, which you can DIY at home if you've got fleece fabric. It's just strips cut, bundled together a little bit like a haystack and then tied around the middle, and the dog can pluck the individual strips of fleece out, and then you just retie it time and again. I have a cage ball version which has thicker strips rolled up and pushed into it. Dogs, you can put food in and then the dog plucks the strips out to get to the food. And then there's a version I make which has some natural materials in it. So I make a version with sheep's wool and another version with alpaca wool. And I'm trialing a guinea pig hair version at the minute, which is going down very, very well. Just wondering where I'm going to get the guinea pig hair from on a sort of more permanent basis. I've been bothering some groomers to try and get them to help me. So we'll see where that goes. But they're great because it's a natural material. It's got natural scent. It's got a really good texture. The sheep's wool is carded and like quite fibrous. The alpaca is lovely and soft, and it's nice to be able to put the ball in front of them and just see them get to work at ripping it up. No food involved. It's really just purely about the shredding, which is quite nice because an awful lot, as you said, of food of enrichment activities that we see are very focused on food, and food is just one element of enrichment. And in fact, sometimes in some circumstances, food can be coercive because a dog may not want to particularly engage with an activity, but they might want the food. So they feel compelled to engage to get the food, but not actually, they don't really want to be there or doing that activity. So we do have to be careful with how we use food enrichment. Shredding is a fantastic thing to give them. It's great for stress relief as well. So I think it's one of those things that not only is it actually, fun and meeting a need, it does also have some benefits in terms of getting the parasympathetic nervous system kicking in and getting rid of the cortisol and getting rid of the adrenaline and letting them just get that feeling out. But like ourselves, sometimes, we go to a rage room maybe and take a hammer or a baseball bat to something. It's a little bit like that for dogs too. So giving them an outlet for that is really helpful.
And I think like the penny is definitely dropping for some people in what you've said in the last couple of minutes, because I think so many of us in the dog community kind of have this opinion, the dog's teddies or toys should be, intact and look beautiful and should be keepsakes to give down from generation to generation. And it's, people tend to freak out when you've got particularly dogs that often, or breeds that love to shred things. I'm thinking like, if you're looking at toy shredding, I think Jack Russell is a brilliant example out there. Dogs that love to get in there and find that thread and pull it and pull it and pull it so they can get to that stuffing. And I think an awful lot of us in the community, the penny hadn't dropped or hasn't, that the dogs are having the time of their life. It might be the best 5 minutes of their week. And
exactly.
Okay, yeah, you might be very upset about the toy that you just got them, but they're not being, destructive out of spite or trying to ruin something or anything like that. They're just getting way more enjoyment out of it than you could ever imagine, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's why, that's why I always push or pitch to people the DIY options. It doesn't have to cost you money. It can be as simple as an Amazon box or a toilet roll tube, as I say, that gives them that enjoyment. And, rather than buying some of the expensive toys that are marketed as tough toys, it's kind of a bit of a waste of time. Go and buy the stuff from the charity shop instead. And interestingly, I think, I don't know the case in the south, but up in the north, in the UK, dog toys and dog products are not regulated. So anybody can make a dog toy to any standard and sell it to you. Whereas children's toys have lots of safety standards applied to them. So, you can go and buy a decent quality secondhand child's toy in a charity shop. And okay, it's not built to last. It's built for children's hands, not dogs' mouths. But the dog's going to get a better experience in terms of the quality of the materials that go into it, and they're still going to get that ripping and shredding. And then you should see a reduction in the shredding of other items, because as I mentioned earlier, they're incredible at picking up context. But, I had a situation I think it was last week. I was on a call for work and I could see out the corner of my eye, Kingsley had got the corner of the blanket of his bed and was sort of chewing it with his back teeth like this, very quietly, just probably trying to sneak one under the radar. So I lifted his wool ball out of the cupboard, tossed it to him. He dropped the blanket, pulled all the wool out. The floor was a mess. And then he immediately went back to sleep. He didn't pick up the blanket again. So, he just needed something to do that with for a short period of time to help him, whether it was to reset or whether he just fancied a bit of a rip and a shred. And then he was happy to drop the thing that I didn't want him to rip and shred, move on to the thing that I did want him to rip and shred, and then he just never went back to sleep.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's no such thing as bad behavior, just our perception of it. But would, some of these enriching activities then be a really good way of reducing, you've already said it, but I just want to kind of hit home, that there are other examples that might be useful as well, like digging in the garden, for example.
Yes.
You could use some enriching activities to maybe help counteract these, right?
I think that's a really important point. And any good trainer or behaviourist that you're working with, one of the first things they will ask you is about your day-to-day routine and what enrichment activities you do together. Because so often we see people going to trainers or behaviourists or completing online, or sadly often dogs being put into rescue or into the pound system, solely or majority related to a lack of opportunity to engage in natural behaviours. And those behaviours come out in other ways that we might not find desirable. And then we start asking them to stop the behaviour rather than giving them an outlet for the behaviour. And that then becomes a significant problem. So, digging is another good example where terriers and those types of breeds often get I don't want to say criticised, but they do get flagged as being, they're all digging up the garden, they're ruining this, they're ruining that. Giving them an outlet for that behaviour, whether that's something like a dig pit, whether it's a specific section of the garden they can dig in. I have a sand pit. It's just a kid's sand pit. It's one of the clamshell ones. You could pick them up, fairly cheap online, or go and look at Facebook Marketplace, which will have somebody, I'm sure, somewhere looking to get rid of one. Fill it with sand or bark or soil or anything you like. My two like fabric, so I put old blankets into it and they dig at the old blankets just to, make a little nest for themselves, or just, to make it, shape it differently. And that has, meant that then the garden's intact. And it's a win-win. They're getting an outlet for natural behaviour. You're getting to conserve your nice garden. So digging's another really good example of, an outlet for a behaviour that a lot of our dogs are genetically wired for, that sometimes in a home environment we find undesirable. So instead of interrupting or stopping the behaviour, giving an outlet for it is going to be better for everybody in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it's brilliant, because I think so many people struggle with a particular behavior or a particular pattern of things that are happening, and they don't quite know what to do. So I think, the last thing as humans we think of is, let's do exactly that activity, just with different stuff. So it's really, really nice to kind of like reframe that as not so much a problem, just a problem way of expressing it, I suppose, isn't it?
Routine really helps as well here. So, if you do a specific activity at a specific time of the day or in a specific set of circumstances, that's also really going to help as well, because your dog is going to learn the routine. They're incredible at picking up this type of thing, and know that, this time of the day is when they get something to chew or something to rip or something to sniff or dig, and they're going to understand that context, which is really, really important as well.
We briefly interrupt this podcast to bring you a message from our dear sponsors, ourselves at dognutrition.ie. We work with canine nutrition clients across Ireland and have specialised knowledge in products and options that are available for our dogs right here. We tailor each nutrition plan to each individual dog and family and their needs and means. We also take into consideration how they want to feed and what they have available locally, as well as where they like to shop. A good nutrition plan doesn't have to be complicated, and we can slot it into the life you lead. Thank you for your attention. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Now I'm going to get a little bit controversial. Maybe there's a little bit of a risk of people using enrichment and ideas for enrichment as a crutch, particularly if, they're leaving the house for larger blocks of time. How do we see that? I know you mentioned already that we might want to be supervising our dogs during enrichment. So how do we see that then?
Yes, I think it's hugely topical. I think, it's one of the most common points of feedback or comments that I get when I'm either talking about something online or trading at a market or event. And I mentioned earlier about supervision. Supervision is the single most important part of enrichment for me, if I'm honest. It's a safety point because no matter how safe you think a toy or activity is, nothing is truly indestructible, especially when it comes to our dogs. And dogs should not be left unsupervised with enrichment toys or enrichment activities. So I always say to people not to leave the house with something for your dog. And what you should do instead, because it's always important, not just to say don't do that, it's always important to give an alternative, is do the activity before you go out with your dog, and they will be much happier and more likely to settle. So if you know you're going to be going to work for the day, take your dog out for their morning walk, let them sniff on their walk, bring them back in maybe 15 minutes before you go to leave, put out a snuffle mat or whatever activity you might be doing with them, and supervise them while they do it too. And then they'll be more likely to settle. But it's also beneficial for us because we can then, when we're supervising, we can observe and learn about our dog, and we can then adjust what we do with them. So not all activities are going to be enriching for all dogs. For example, a snuffle mat might not be fulfilling for one dog and another dog might love it. So it's really important that we are actually supervising and learning, and we're doing the activity together because it's quality time as well with our animal before we're going out for 8 or 9 hours and leaving them at home. So I think it's really important that we don't use enrichment activities as a way of helping our dog settle, for example, as well. That's another really important topic that comes up an awful lot, which is separation anxiety. And if you have concerns about separation anxiety, the advice is to go and see a canine behaviorist or trainer who specializes in this behavior, rather than trying to resolve the issues yourself, because it's a really tricky behavior. And it's not going to help separation anxiety if you are leaving them with an activity. The association is going to become quite strong there about the activity and you departing, and they probably won't engage with the activity, or they'll be stressed about the activity then as well. So my advice is not to leave your dog unsupervised with any enrichment toy. Now, coming back to your point there, Killian, about enriched activities becoming a little bit of a crutch. I think there's a broader trend on social media, which I can sort of understand, but I do find is a little bit problematic, is the reliance on food for enrichment. I mentioned a little bit earlier that food can be coercive. I do think we rely on food enrichment an awful lot for our dogs, which is understandable. It's accessible. There's lots of toys on the market for food enrichment. So it's something that's easy for us to do and it meets a need. I think the concern about food really is that food is a primary motivator. All of us need food for survival. If we are reusing food toys for enrichment all the time, it can become stressful for our dogs, particularly if they're hungry or if they've maybe you've got a rescue dog who's had food scarcity issues. And if you're kind of locking the food behind, it's almost like a paywall, sometimes it can be stress inducing for them and can be frustration inducing as well. So I don't recommend enrichment toys at every meal. Instead, I would suggest that, most of their food goes into a bowl, so they're not worried about having access to their food. And then maybe some of the food goes into an enrichment toy. Or you set aside some of their food from their meals throughout the day to use outside of meal times in an enrichment toy instead. So yeah, that was just I guess a related point around reliance on enrichment for leaving our dogs, but also just generally about reliance on certain activities.
Absolutely, and I think you kind of touched on it as well with frisbee and fetch earlier. I suppose like an any enriching activity, I presume, should be part of like a larger life and not just be their whole lives. And I suppose if something is truly enriching for our pets, I'm guessing, you know, it's going to be for a short amount of time, and then they're going to be good anyway. They're probably going to fall asleep and settle, like you say. Do you think it's probably better like little and often for for a lot of these things, and add a bit of variety as well?
Absolutely. I think, yes, that's a really valid point there about little and often. I think we think enrichment, often, especially food enrichment, should be something that lasts a long time. And again, another really common question I get is when people look at the enrichment toys that I make, they ask me, which of these toys is going to take my dog the longest to complete? And I think it's this, I understand where the question comes from. I understand that often we equate the length of an activity with the value of the activity, but ultimately, I think it's just the wrong way of thinking about it. I think a better way to think about it is what behaviors does my dog show and what would benefit those behaviors. So because something lasts 20 minutes or 30 minutes, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be of value to the dog. A good example of that is freezing activity. So freezing enrichment toys. There's lots of freezer specific toys out there for food. And I think, again, we think of it in terms of the length of time that it takes the dogs to finish a specific thing. My two dogs will, in the summertime when it's hot, will take a frozen toy. Outside of that, I don't do it. And it's just frustrating for them. They're sitting, they give up as well. They sort of wait until it melts and then they eat it. And it's like, well, where was the value in that for them? And sometimes when we think something should take 20 or 30 minutes, your dog might be getting really frustrated, especially if the food is hard to get to. So my thoughts on that are, it's much better to do little and often. And also you can, I think it's, people don't think about this, but you can offer the same activity, but refill it a couple of times. So, a snuffle mat, you can put, a small few pieces on it, let them snuffle, find it. They come back to you, you refill it for them and do it again. Or you can set up, a couple of things in a room. So maybe you have a snuffle mat, one part of the room. Maybe you have something for them to shred in another part of the room, and maybe you have something for them to lick or chew set up as well. So they're getting multiple opportunities to meet multiple different needs without feeling compelled to work at one specific toy for a long time to get a small amount of food. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on some of the food related sides.
It makes total sense, bringing it back to the human side, because we are so egocentric. I mentioned a couple of examples at the beginning of things that I love. So travel, if, after 3 weeks of every day having a guided tour of a different city, you're going to be sick of doing tours of cities. I love coffee. Do I want 100 in a day? No, absolutely not. I don't want 20 in a day either. It's the same with cheese. Try these 450 cheeses of all the different areas of France. Like, you're going to get sick of it after the maybe 10th or 12th one. So it's like kind of breaking it down into little pieces that you can still enjoy, right? Isn't it? And make sure that you're still getting enjoyment out of it.
And there's some simple things you can do in the time that it takes to boil a kettle. If you're, you work from home, go and boil the kettle maybe 5 or 6 times a day. There's so much you can do. You can drop a few bits of food on the floor for them to forage. You can play, bowling for kibble, you can, or whatever, you can throw a treat away from you. They go to retrieve it. They come back to you. You throw it in the other direction. You can play a quick game of tug. You can, do some body work or grooming. Maybe you can do some cooperative care training, working on nails, whatever it might be. So there's lots of things you can do that don't take an awful lot of time, don't cost any money, and will result in your dog feeling much more fulfilled and therefore much more settled, which is a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, that's been an amazing chat about enrichment, and I'm sure you've piqued loads of people's curiosity now about all different areas of enrichment. And I think, I guess, staying curious is probably one of the things we definitely need to keep in mind. Don't fall in, obviously our dogs love routine overall, but I think adding a little bit of excitement into their lives, something a bit special for them, is also something really, really valuable. Yeah, appreciate you coming on and chatting with me so much. Thanks a million, Rosie. It's so appreciated.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoys the episode. If you've got any burning questions, do feel free to find me on Instagram and drop me a DM.
Yeah, we'll absolutely put all of your contact details and social medias and everything into the show notes as always. So people will definitely be able to track you down. Thank you so much once again, and have a lovely day.
Thank you.
So once again, a huge thank you to Rosie for coming on and sharing with us all about enrichment, or at least scratching the surface on the topic. I mean, these podcast episodes, they're not 10, 20, 50 hours long, and you can only share so much in a short time, and that goes for every guest, of course. But there are amazing nuggets of information in every single episode. So just like the other guests, Rosie is so appreciated for coming on and sharing with us. You might remember from the intro to the podcast, I've asked you specifically to share out your favourite podcast episode with an audience of people that will appreciate it and will get value from it. There's so much value, guys, in the episodes that we've recorded. And to do justice to speakers just like Rosie, it would be amazing if you could share out some of the episodes. Thank you very much for listening in. If you'd like to find out more about all about enrichment or about Ruby Reese or dognutrition.ie, indeed, you can find all of our links in the show notes as well. Thank you very much for being a valued audience member, and we'll see you very, very soon for another topic. Thank you.